Okay, hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webinar, Virtual Reality Gets Real. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am the editor-at-large for eSchool News, and I'm happy you're joining us today for what I know will be a very insightful and important conversation. This event is brought to you by Lenovo. Lenovo is a $70 billion global technology powerhouse, ranked 171 in the Fortune Global 500. They employ 75,000 people around the world. Focused on a bold vision to deliver smarter technology for all, Lenovo has built on its success as the world's leading PC company by expanding into key growth areas, including server, storage, mobile, and those are solutions and services. With over 20 years of education technology leadership and a team of experts focused on higher education and K-12 education, Lenovo offers flexible solutions which are ready to create a secure, dynamic environment for collaborative learning and a borderless campus. Now, before we get to our conversation, I'd like to take a minute to go over some of the features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. This event is being recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. If you have any questions or comments for the panelists, there's a chat function, then you can launch that by clicking on chat. Feel free to use this feature to contact someone from eSchool News team if you're having a technical question as well. So with these housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started with our conversation and some introductions. We have a great panel here today, starting off with Jesse Sadlowski. Jesse is the Director of Technology and Learning and Innovation for Lethbridge School Division. He is passionate when it comes to fostering and implementing technology into curriculum. Prior to his position, Jesse worked as a high school principal and a sessional instructor at the University of Lethbridge. He holds a master's degree from the university with a focus on technology leadership. Next, Andy Teislow. Andy serves as the vice principal at Dr. Robert Plaxton Elementary School. With more than 15 years of teaching under his belt, Andy has developed a passion for creative, innovative learning experiences for his students, which is why he partnered with District IT and the City of Lethbridge to launch the school's first virtual field trip series. Next, Becky Lane. Becky is the Associate Director of Innovative Technologies at Ithaca College and leads the Center for Creative Technology, an open and collaborative resource where students can create and experience innovative digital and physical content, including AR and VR. In partnership with Lenovo's education team, she recently ran a Teach the Teachers pilot program using Lenovo's VRS3 headset and the Think Reality platform. This program was to show aspiring K-12 teachers how immersive media can supplement and surpass traditional media applications in teaching and learning, and to instruct them on how to implement a successful program. And last but certainly not least, Brian Moynihan. Brian is the Immersive Education Solutions Manager at Lenovo. He is a strong advocate of augmented and virtual reality to raise the bar for educational insight and mastery in K-12, higher education, and other settings. He led immersive learning initiatives at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and has brought Lenovo's VR classroom solutions to hundreds of schools. So thanks all you guys for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Now, we know that VR is no longer the stuff of science fiction, but virtual reality applications are up and running and making significant educational impacts in the classroom. So for the audience, do you want your students to visit Mars, explore inside the bloodstream, or travel around the world to learn a new language? With the right equipment and professional development, augmented and virtual reality techniques can provide students with experiences that are the next best thing to being there. And there's no better group to give you those particulars than these folks right here. So let's dig in. And Brian, maybe start with you to talk about, give us your big picture of where we are when it comes to virtual reality. It's much more than watching old shows of Star Trek, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. And I'm so excited to be on this panel with such wonderful people. I've worked with Becky and Andy and Jesse before, and you're in for a treat for those who are watching or listening. So yeah, a little background about me. I got into augmented and virtual reality because I was focused on instructional technology at the University of North Carolina, UNC Chapel Hill. And I came to see that AR and VR could really change everything. And I think, when we give people a couple of examples, you see maybe one example where we'd say, well, what if you could go into this, historical location and see what it's like at the Taj Mahal? It's like, okay, there's one thing I could see how that would be useful. And then somebody, well, what if we could, practice in a hospital and see what it would be like to be a nurse and then practice some of those elements. And then somebody's got a second thing. But at some point you see a third example, a fourth example, and then, and I think that there's a common point where people's minds are blown. This certainly happened to me. I was like, wow, we could use this for everything. This could be like a full simulation of anything we want to simulate. And so I feel like that's really amazing. And so the way I think about it is raising the ceiling and raising the floor. So I think that some schools are doing amazing things already, and they could take it to the next level with virtual reality, with all kinds of augmented reality, et cetera. But I also feel like there's many schools that are in some ways being left behind. There's a great example, if you've ever heard of Kai XR. Kai was a teacher outside of Washington, D.C., and she had disadvantaged students who lived maybe a half hour away from the city who had never been to see some of the great monuments and museums of their own city nearby. And she was saying like XR was a way that she saw to bring that to her students. And so I think it's this idea that we're raising the ceiling and raising the floor. So to me, it's incredibly exciting. And we've seen more and more people sort of turn onto it and start to understand the potential. So I'm excited to be talking about it today.
So let me ask you this just to start off. I know there are folks in the audience. I know myself going to sessions over the years and hearing about the advantages of VR and AR and XR. Can you break those acronyms down for us, maybe to kind of set the table of what those differences are?
Yeah, absolutely. So AR is augmented reality. So if that's when 3D digital content is added to some sort of live view of the world around you. So in the simplest form, we're seeing that with phones or a tablet. It could also be done more immersively if you had a pair of glasses that either a heads-up display or something that really gave you a sense that something was there in front of you. So an educational use case for that, this would be great if you wanted to visualize anything that would be maybe seen much better in 3D. So like a molecule, for instance, in the chemistry class, you'd be able to understand it way better than you would from a two-dimensional image that you might get from a traditional textbook, et cetera. And I think one of the things that's a little hard to get across is I could show you, for instance, an example of a 360 video that's playing on a laptop, but you don't have the full wraparound experience. There's something about breaking out of the traditional flat rectangle that until you've done it, you can't really understand it. So I think, for instance, that the pandemic made it harder for people to do that. I do think that the pandemic is going to accelerate some of these trends in education, but at the same time, fewer people got the chance to really try it on their head. But in any case, that's augmented reality. So when digital objects in the world around you, virtual reality is when it basically completely replaces the world around you, right? The immersive experience that replaces the real life environment. So I would say this is best for other times when you want to travel to Mars, as you mentioned, or go in the bloodstream, or travel around the world, or even in many cases to like a real science laboratory that might be in your own city. So it's great for any situation where this experience would be impossible or difficult. There's a famous expression, DICE, D-I-C-E, which is if something is dangerous, impossible, counterproductive, or expensive in the real world and in your classroom, it would be better done in VR. And I think that helps make the case actually for why this is a thing. It's not just one more expense, it's something that actually in many ways could save money that you might otherwise be spending on something. So virtual dissection being an example of that, or field trips or another, et cetera. I do want to put a plug in for when you hear XR, that's just like all the R's, right? That doesn't
Right.
augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality. Mixed reality has some different ways it goes, but I think some of the most exciting things, and I think we'll probably get to the future in the future, is talk about mixed reality. So a lot of them are like VR headsets that have pass-through video, and that has only started to trickle into education, but I think it'll be incredibly powerful in the future. So companies like Lenovo is about to launch a headset like that, but I think it's out of range in terms of cost today for most schools. But Vario, which is way out of range, really high-end stuff that's probably $5,000 and up. And then other major players.
Great, thanks, Brian. Becky, talk a little bit about, I know that you're waist deep into it, not even virtually, but in reality. Talk a little bit about your experiences using these technologies over the years and the kind of the state of play of where you are right now.
Yeah, sure. So I work at Ithaca College and I do a couple of things. I work with faculty to integrate immersive technologies into their teaching. And I also work with our education department to do this the teachers program where we taught master students who are on the cusp of becoming teachers themselves how to use immersive technology in their classrooms. So that was a really interesting experience for us because we can talk about the differences between the different headset systems and how we apply these different technologies and the content between college-aged learners and K-12 learners. And one of the things I find very interesting is that one of the things I get asked a lot is, what headset should I buy? What system should I go with? And you really see a huge difference between the commercial headsets that are designed for gaming and the education-focused headsets that are really designed to facilitate ease of use for a classroom or a teacher who may not have an IT department behind them, like I have the luxury of having an entire IT department behind me to help me with my headsets, and as a K-12 teacher, you probably won't have that. So that's where I think that you have to kind of look at, where you want to go and think about what you want to teach your students. I know I feel like I'm gone off a little tangent there, but I just wanted to make sure that I brought that up, because to me, it's one of the biggest things to think about before you even embark on a VR or immersive program. We started very small, and had I known that the magnitude TLC that some of these headsets would take, I might have made different choices.
Interesting. And so Andy and Jesse, Brian and Becky were into the big picture, bleeding edge aspect of things. And this particular technology, especially when it comes within the world of education technology, sounds really great. But there's also the reality of implementing it into the day-to-day workings of a classroom, and then also kind of scaling it to where you're trying to find maybe a solution that is school-wide or district-wide, where there may become some more challenges. Maybe you guys could start by kind of talking about what your journey has been being introduced to such cutting-edge technologies and how you're making it work day to day. I'll let you guys flip a coin to see who goes first.
Well, I have this feeling that my high-end tech support, Jesse, who I go to when I have support. And Becky, you have your IT department. I have Jesse. He's going to want me to just jump in here, and I don't mind. So thanks for having me. The big thing that we noticed when we first jumped in, well, we didn't jump in right away with Lenovo, admittedly. We jumped in with the other guys, starts with a G, rhymes with Oogle, that we wanted to try something because it was pandemic driven. We needed something that was cheap, something that was something to try, and something that would engage our students. And we quickly found that there was not the avenue that we wanted, because it was very restrictive. So the first thing we learned is we had to decide, is it teacher-led or is it student-led? Because if we didn't know which one we wanted, you could get very easily sucked into something that was just teacher-led, and then it was students sit and experience whatever. I mean, we built a Disneyland one for our first one. Great, they can see Disneyland, but there's no video, it's only pictures, and they just sit and an eye guide where they go. As we moved into more conversations with Lenovo, it became very clear that there was more opportunity for students to choose where they went, but also still use the software that Lenovo produces in their Lenovo partnership with their products, that we could still direct the learners. Like, we're all going to start here, but then you can choose your own adventure as you get in there. So that was a really great option for teachers in our division, in our school, K-12 or K-5, sorry, to know that, okay, I can start with the small steps of I guide students into the first experiences so they can just see what VR looks like. So those were our initial steps. And then we've started to explore more of, okay, what does it look like when they interact more with the environment? How do we use Lenovo headset and the technology to move through an environment or manipulate the environment? Do we want them to manipulate things? What can they manipulate? And then if they're not manipulating, what experiences are we offering that are not simply sit and gets, but there's an opportunity to still interact and even create their own experiences.
Yeah, I'd like to build on that with Andy, because when we first started the project, like Andy said, we have to be very careful that, like any technology, that it becomes passive for our students. And so we had this vision, you know, where everybody has a headset and we're all doing the experience together, just like you would go on a journey together. But we learned very quickly that's not what our students were wanting. Our students were wanting to choose their own adventures. They wanted to be interacting with advice, with objects inside the experience, with the controllers. They wanted to afterwards talk about their experiences with students and how they experience. So it's really transformed in our division in the last 2 years from, hey, here's an experience for you to partake in, to now we have grade 4 or 5 classes actually creating their own experiences. And when we allow the students to use the software to create their own VR experiences, they've completely transformed it into create your own adventure. Here's what I'm building. Here's what you can do. So they've almost gamified it, where we want to present something to them to give them the experience where they want to make sure that it's engaging for their users on their end, and they're displaying what they're learning. So we're really excited to have our high school students creating their own VR experiences now to show their learning, to display their learning. They're going online, finding 360 pictures, even though they're 2D. We have grade 4s and 5s creating their own experiencing, showing their learning. So it's really transformed from this sit and get kind of can be careful to be a passive experience to this, hey, I'm going to create something and I'm going to show you what I learned by creating this product. So it's been really, really interesting to see. And again, the technology is there where it's simple enough where we can, as teachers, present an experience to our students. But once our students get comfortable with the experiences, then they want to build their own. And they're like, I want to build this. I'm going here. And Brian not only mentioned schools that are disadvantages, we have students that are disadvantaged that may not be able to assess a field trip that day or to experience something at the school. And so they can come back and feel that they're part of that class and they've experienced something, even though they may have not had that opportunity as a school that day. So not only do we have schools that are disadvantaged, sometimes we have students that are disadvantaged. And Andy was a school where he had students with online learners. So one of the impetuses for having it was we could send one of these headsets home and they could also join the class that day and experience what the students experienced in real life as well.
And I just want to jump in here and build on what Jesse's talking about, because in the Teach the Teachers program, one of the things that I thought was so fantastic is these new teachers just grabbed onto this technology and became creators as well. So they made a plan that they went out at 360 support. They used some of the third-party construction programs like Uptail to make an entire lesson around it. And every one of them sort of use a tech in a different way. And I think that was one of the most satisfying things about running that program, was just to see how these teachers who are going to be out there are grabbing onto this tech and really running with it.
And to speak to that note, again, we wanted to personalize to our local context. And part of the curriculum is, you know, your community and the people in your community. So one of the popular field trips in our area is the local fire hall. And the kids love going, but we also know that when you travel to the fire hall, you spend the money on the bus, you do the booking, you get your plans ready, you show up, and every truck and ambulance is out because they're on a call, right? And so the kids are excited to go see the fire hall, but then they miss the experience of the trucks. So now we have an experience that we built through Uptail, where we said, okay, if you happen to go to the fire hall and you miss the truck, you can always come back to the school and see the whole truck tour, up, down, inside, wherever, in the VR headsets. And we even got a chance to go up on the ladder that extends like 100 feet up. It would fall under that. You can't take every kid up in the bucket because it's dangerous and expensive and you can't do that. But now each one of our students can experience that because it just took one VR trip with the camera, right? So similar to your story there, Becky, the teachers really wanted to make something that was local context, personalized, meaningful, and made sense to them.
Yeah, and then for the things that I've been working on building and things that I've been learning from the schools that have been doing, there's definitely a split between the people who have never done this before, never taught with VR, don't know where to start, and they want something that's really easy. And then the other people who are like, yes, let's dive in. And I think that a lot of people are aspirational. They want to be those creators, but they can't get there right away. The path might be, as Becky said, sooner than you think. But I do think that we're always trying to plan for both of those sides. So for what we've done, we have like preset content, but we also have lots of options for creation, and some of them cost money and some of them don't. You can go out and start creating things right away in WebXR, or you could go and upload your own 360 videos, or you could find things online, or you can create using one of these tools. And these tools can be amazing. I mean, they have analytics, they have questions that you can completely customize them. They're really amazing. But if you're on a budget, you can also do all kinds of other things as well.
Well, Brian, you had mentioned the pandemic a little earlier. Would you say that the experiences, this forced beta test that we've had to use all sorts of technologies from remote learning, and also just trying to find any tools to keep connected with the kids, has had kind of, maybe this is one pandemic silver lining that we can pull out of it, that even maybe some of the most resistant educators who might to using technology in the classroom now can kind of see the potential of it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for instance, my parents, who I didn't think would ever be people who were into video chatting, it became a part of their everyday life during the pandemic, right? And I think as we're joining now, some of us on audio and some on video, but I think that video chatting has become something we're very commonly used to, and we see the benefit. I think, just as audio takes us part of the way and video takes us part of the way, I think that having that immersive element takes us even further. So I do think it's moving things along in that way.
And does that resonate, Andy and Jesse, with your community, in terms of where maybe VR 5 years ago might have been a harder sell as a novelty, but now people are kind of more comfortable with it in general?
Yeah, for sure. Like we started probably, you're right, about 5 years ago with different technologies, like Andy says, bringing everything in and trying things, and starting at a district level where we'd have a kit. We had a committee together that could bring objects and devices into the schools. And we still have that going on today, where I got a teacher emailed me this morning. They did a dinosaur dig. So they 3D printed dinosaur bones. They buried it in plaster. The kids had to dig up the bones, assemble the dinosaurs. And now they're asking for us to bring VR headsets into their classroom so the kids can actually understand the actual size of the dinosaurs, because they have to print off smaller bones, but she's trying to explain that these are massive creatures. So when you put on the experience and you can actually see now how large this dinosaur is and the skeleton is, it just adds to that student's understanding and learning. And it's impactful that students, that memory will, stay with that student for the rest of their life, where they've actually had to physically dig up these bones. And then now they're standing in front of this dinosaur. So and again, for us, hopefully it sparks something with that student. And we have some students that now have a real interest in dinosaurs and want to pursue that as a career and expand their learning beyond the curriculum. So for us, giving students those opportunities to spark those little areas of learning in creative ways is just huge potential for us. And I think our students are so lucky to be living in this day and age where they can experience some of this stuff. And wow, what a fantastic learning opportunity for our students.
I love that example. Really cool combination of the physical, tactical, digging things up, and the immersive. That's a great combination.
Yeah, that's great. I'm seeing some questions are coming in from the audience, which is fantastic. And actually, it was a perfect segue, Becky. Just a question I had for you. You had mentioned about schools are just kind of getting started in this, and I guess this will be a question for everybody. But someone from the audience was asking for a list of maybe some of the kind of a go-to list of where you're going to get started with. Like what would be those first steps? And we know there particular pieces of hardware, there are particular apps or websites or TED Talks. But so, if someone came up to you in the halls of ISTE and said, just listen to your talk about the benefits of VR, what are the first things I should do to get started?
Well, for me, it would be really to ask yourself, what are your needs? And to be really honest about your budget, and your intentions, the level of support that you have, and who's going to be using it. So as far as the resources, I think Brian and Jesse and Andy would probably be better for this particular audience. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
For me to start with, obviously, I work at Lenovo, and I'm proud of what we've done with VR Classroom. So there's VR Classroom has a lot of that. But that being said, I think if there are places you can go online. AR, VR, and EDU. Jamie Donnelly has all kinds of things for AR and VR. And oftentimes her focus, I think, is usually on those first-time users on something that's totally free. So I think that's good for beginners and getting the understanding. I do think from Lenovo's perspective, once you want to really implement it in the classroom, you want to think about the technology and how it's going to work. If you have multiple headsets, how are you going to make sure that everybody has one? And then how do you charge it? And how do you make sure that you get content on there? And how do you get support when something goes wrong? And what kind of content are you going to put? And so I think that schools sometimes will, and I think maybe the panelists can speak to this, will have this sort of like Frankenstein, like I took this headset and tried to find this content and I had these questions and nobody could answer me and I wanted the internet, you know? And so Lenovo was trying to put those together into one. But also, I think we can put in the chat, but there's some very inspiring talks from my point of view. I have some things, and I think we have planned a little bit at the end of this talk to talk about like where the future horizons are. And one of my favorites, I'll drop it in the chat, but this is idea of, you know, kind of almost like a VR science museum, the way I'm inspired by it. And so so how it anyway, I'll drop it in the chat and you'll see it later. But anyway, Andy and Jesse, you can jump on.
Well, for us, really what we looked at it is we wanted a classroom experience. We do have units in our learning commons, and where our learning commons can set up different experiences for students who are in that area in our maker spaces. But for us, we needed a system where every student would have a headset and experience this together as a classroom, and a teacher could walk in, just like, you know, when we used to use laptop carts and have your card and everybody has their own machine and are working together. So the Lenovo headsets were a perfect fit for us because they were the only ones that actually had an MDM, right? We could manage them from an endpoint user, and Andy could easily push the content to the students, and we could actually manage and see where the students are. So we didn't want to have a barrier of like, give me your headset, let me take it off, let me see what you see. We wanted to have it very simple. Every kid walked to the cart, they grab a headset, they grab their clicker, they put it on, they turn it on. Andy can push the experience to them, and everybody's working and with a little amount of time. So all of a sudden you walk in and you have, you know, 32 students and one of the support staff and Andy talking to everybody. And Andy's able to put up a headset and talk about the experience before they get into it and what they're supposed to do. And eventually, just like our laptops, you know, the first couple of times it takes 15 minutes for everybody to log in kindergarten and grade 2. But by the end of the year, everybody just walks in, grabs them, and away you go, right? So for us, the Lenovo was really different because it was one of the only series that we could see implementing as a whole classroom set and not as a standalone device. But there's, like Brian says, there's so many different versions out there. Again, Becky's right. What is the purpose of this, and how do you envision this in your school?
And just a couple more resources that I've found helpful. There's a lot of Facebook groups that you can join. You just search on Facebook, and there's a fairly large community who are really interested in using VR in education. There's also a VR in education group in AltSpace VR, if you've ever been on AltSpace. That's a pretty lively group as well.
We're getting a ton of questions in from the audience, which is really terrific. So, but this is actually to address, Jesse, what you were talking about. Can you cast the view that the student is seeing to a screen for the rest of the class when it comes to like actual presentation? You were talking about the MDM setup.
So I'll let Brian and Andy that, because that was one of our first questions when we started. Can we broadcast it? And Andy, where are we on that?
What we discovered was that the version of headsets that we had did have a screen capture feature. So what I've done a couple of times, because it is difficult saying, okay, give me your headset, what do you see? Okay, now you go like you're handing the headset back and forth, not ideal. So what we did is we created a bunch of like mini tutorials with the screen capture option within the headsets, which I can literally plug into the computer. Computer recognizes it as a USB device. I pull the video off, and then I post that to our YouTube or whatever. So I can say to students, okay, these are the steps that you need to follow to get into the app. Because once they're in the app, like once they're in Uptail, I've already got the experience preloaded. They already know which one they got to go to. It's just, there's just, when you're talking with grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 students, there's that point and click feature that's just takes a little bit of extra time. So rather than saying, okay, everybody stop, waiting, okay, everybody start, we show the video, and then we ask students to go kind of step by step. So we couldn't connect it directly to a projector. these headsets. I'm hoping when as Lenovo advances with their headsets, that's probably going to be a feature they're going to look at because that would be awesome. But they do have that great screen capture option where I can just screen capture, put it to any device that I'd like, put it on YouTube, and then they can watch from that point.
And there are a range of things you could do. The current headset that you're referring to is the Mirage VR S3, and that does have Miracast. So Miracast is a standard for casting to all kinds of devices. That being said, the standard's been around since 2015, but not all devices are really good at receiving it. So there are a number of things you could do, like getting a Miracast dongle, but it's not always as easy as it should be. But there are various options for casting on that headset and for many headsets.
Well, that also brings up another interesting fact too, because we have some students. I found out I made a career fair experience of what it's like to be an IT person in our division, and we also give the option to students just to use a computer, the 2D version of it, because sometimes they're not comfortable wearing the headsets or they have anxiety in those spaces. So again, allowing students to partake in that event and using different platforms is also important to us as well too. So I know myself, when we go to a school and if we have one experience, we make sure that students can also participate on a laptop or view the experiences in different ways, right? So it was one of the things we learned early on. Not everybody wants to put on the headset right away, right? There's some anxiety and fear there. So making sure that the content is accessible outside of the headsets, which it really is. Like you can look at the 2D, and we have students that enjoy those experiences as well.
Gotcha. Speaking content, and this is a question again from the audience I think everybody here can share their insights with. It's how do you write educational programs and or access education programs for what I want to teach? So again, we're talking about this evolution. I know you have educators who have had their curricula for 25 years on a particular piece, be it history or social studies. How are they able to apply this to the way they've always done it? And if not, if there's things that new, how do you go about putting together lesson plans for VR, other than going to Chat GPT?
So one of the things is we have great partners like Viative, for instance, that have STEM modules that are in, biology, chemistry, virtual tours as well, and that those are curriculum mapped. So for instance, you can look and see for any given module how it lines up with next generation science standards and some other standards. And so if you're going to be teaching about photosynthesis, then you can plug it in. So there are some ways that are just a little bit more straightforward. And then there are ways that you can be really creative. One of the ones that I learned from Becky's students actually was if you were teaching about To Kill a Mockingbird, they went and found a 360 video of a courtroom that you could put on, and then they read the book, they tried the 360 video, and then they did it in their class where they were like spatially arranged the room like there was a courtroom. And so I love that combination again of the sort of the physical and the digital physical and way it was done. So I think there's a lot of examples out there for how you could do it, but to just get started, there's some very simple things. So you can just think about what is, and I think that, VR, it's not something that's going to take up your entire school day, right? It's going to be 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. It's going to be supplementary and sort of complementary to everything else you're doing in your curriculum.
Yeah, and I really encourage people to get creative with the content that's out there, especially when you're thinking about having an embodied experience or the importance of being in a space when you're teaching something. For example, we've got a professor at the college who's teaching murals in Los Angeles. So what we did is we brought her students in, put them in Google Earth, and they went to Los Angeles in Google Street View to see these murals in the neighborhoods in which they're supposed to be designed to be seen. So you can look around, you can see the mural, then you can look around and see the neighborhood you're in. You can walk down the street and see just have a sense of space and be with the mural and experience art in a different way. So I think that being creative and looking at, what are you trying to get your students to understand, and look at all the content that's out there is really key.
And even also, I'm trying to think, we had one grade 4 teacher who approached me and said, look, we're doing weather and climate, and we get to this topic about severe weather events, and I always show a picture of a tornado, and I always show a picture of a flood. Do we have anything where students can see what a tornado is like? And that was an easy find. We hopped onto YouTube together. And we said, hey, look at all these tornado chaser videos that they've posted in 360. They already exist. Now we just have to, sorry, that's my bell. We just have to get them attached into the headsets. And so we go into our Nova headsets, access an app that brings us a browser. We click into YouTube and it's quick and easy. It pops into 360 video. And now we're watching we're being storm chasers, or they're in an area where there is flooding that somebody's recorded, where they can see the devastation to what climate change or severe weather events can do with flooding. And they can see, well, that's really high on that house. Never realized what it would look like, right? And it was just a simple ask for the teachers, and we just YouTubed it to start, right? So that was an easy in for some of our teachers for VR as well.
And you made me think of one of the tips to somebody who was asking what they could do. YouTube is an amazing source for 360 videos. The search, so you search for anything, you search for space, you search for Native Americans, you search for Hamlet. And then after you do your search, there's a little button that is not obvious, but you can filter your search. And you filter by 360, and then a bunch of stuff will come up, really on almost any topic you can imagine. So especially if you're a little bit flexible about where you're going to bring it into your curriculum, it's all over the place. But for some things like that, like space or tornadoes and stuff like that, you'll always find good content.
So while we're in the weeds here, more questions coming in. This is really terrific. A question about authoring tools for teachers and what they can use to build environments themselves. So I mean, now we're kind of going to kind of a next level here. What are the learning curves on programs like Unity or Spacio for educators if they want to take this to the next level? Becky, I'll throw that one at you first.
Unity, I would say the learning curve is fairly high. It's not there. They have a ton of tutorials, and it's not insurmountable task, but it's designed to it's an effort. Something like the Uptail system is really user-friendly. It's more like building a map and putting the content in the spaces. It's very logical, and that's what we used for our Teach the Teachers program, where the students were able to make these fantastic experiences, bringing in 360 video, bringing in quizzes, bringing in learning paths. And I find that that's one of the best ways to for anyone really to make an immersive experience. And the cool thing about Uptail too is that you can get voice recognition, so you can ask a question to the Uptail and have that be part of the experience too. So it really varies. So yes, if you want to put in the time, you can learn Unity. It's free, which is great. But if you can get access to something like Uptail, that I think is your better bet.
Great, thank you. Now, Brian, someone made a mention about YouTube, saying that YouTube is great until the ad pops up and kills the experience. But there is an educational version of YouTube, right? Or is there a workaround for something like that?
Yeah, there are various ways you can do it. It's often in the URL. So one of the things that we do when we send out a URL is, and actually we have a little thing that can convert those URLs. You can convert it so it doesn't have the ads on it. So it is possible to do it that way. But that's right. You don't necessarily want the ads or like the sidebar where it goes to the next video, etc. So you be careful a little bit, but as a user, as a first start, it's a good way to go. And we have set up a system that makes that easier.
And another audience member just popped in and said, TeacherTube is a way that you can, I guess, get around that as another search engine opportunity. And again, just this is just great. Everybody's really engaged online. So someone was asking for the example of the courtroom scene in To Kill a Mockingbird. Do you just Google a courtroom picture and then upload it to their headsets? Kind of walk us through that particular process. And I'll add to that, is this something that this is something that a teacher is prepping beforehand? This is not something that's happening, kind of live and on the fly, right?
I can let others decide, but there's a couple ways of doing it. Like one of them is you find something that works. In this case, the students had found something that they found online. But the other one is to create it yourself. So a 360 camera can cost, I think I've seen as low as $80 and probably about $300 for a reasonable one. And they work just like you might have your phone. So you could watch a Hollywood movie that cost millions of dollars to produce and took lots of time and expertise, or you could just grab your cell phone and go out and make a movie. And I think the 360 is like that as well. So for really high quality 360 experiences, you go through trusted partners. But if you do have a camera, really anybody can just turn it on and start taking 360 either as a photo or video. So Becky, this is your particular example. Do you have any thoughts?
No, that's exactly it. I mean, and you can use your phone to take a 360 photo. And even Google had the VR option to do sort of a VR effect. And the example I remember from the students was they went out and with the 360 camera and did a whole series on solar panels and cutting grass around solar panels and how you can't really do that. So they had a flock of sheep. So they put the 360 camera amongst all the sheep, and then you got to be in there and see just how the grass is managed and why you can't mow. And it was really effective, and it wasn't that difficult for them to do.
The same thing right now, we're creating a VR experience for international students. So we're interviewing international students, and we're creating an international video we'll sell in Alberta. And we're working with a local filmmaker, and he's actually been teaching some of us and our teachers some of the tricks and tips about videotaping in 360. There can only be one moving object, and it has to be 30 seconds to try to not make the viewer sick or motion sickness. So he would show us some examples. So again, we have a number of 360 cameras where our teachers can sign out. And the simple and quick and easy, dirty way to do it is just to throw something quick up on YouTube or TeacherTube, and have them show their students what they did over the weekend, if it's skiing or giving the camera to a student and taking it on that vacation with them during the school week. And so yeah, the early easy way to get into it. And then Uptail, if you can navigate PowerPoint, you can navigate Uptail. It's that simple. It's a fantastic tool.
There's also a great website called 360 Cities, and it's full of 360 panorama video and pictures that I think are also usable. So if you wanted a courtroom scene or the base of the pyramids or whichever, you could use a site like 360 Cities, or even some of your like stock media, Shutterstock, some of those ones. They do have 360 images that when you import them into the software, it recognizes it. It's a panoramic image, and it just wraps it around without you having to worry about anything. So if you don't have the technology, there are websites where you can pull images off. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. Where you can just import those into the software.
Great. Again, questions keep coming in. Although a couple asking about evidence, that AR and VR improves educational outcomes. Another interesting one about evidence about improving student behavior. That behavior is a skill, and that was one of the questions I was going to pull back on in terms of the actual management of a classroom, and depending on, I guess, on the age and maturity of students. Talk a little bit about well, A, the evidence, and B, how to manage those sort of activities, which for most students, I guess, would be probably a new way of learning. And Andy, maybe I'll throw that on your plate first.
Sure, no problem. So I mean, I don't have like documented evidence, but my observations have been that some of our students who struggle with managing behavior, they find that VR is an engaging part of their day. And because they're engaged in something that's unique and meaningful and something that they're truly interested in, that we don't see as many outward behaviors when they're engaged in VR. There's still the prompting, there's still okay, these are expectations and the norms around VR, and here's how we're going to keep each other safe with VR. We're not gonna run around. We're not gonna flail our arms. Those kinds of things. We've noticed that there's an engagement piece. We've also noticed that, and just looking through the chat here, that we limit the time with our younger kids in the VR because it can be overwhelming for a kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2 student, right? Where that's different for a grade 3, 4, 5 high school, university student. So what we try to do is say, okay, the experiences for our little kids are shorter, more meaningful, and maybe broken up over time for multiple visits. And then our older students can handle more like the 10, 15 minutes experiences. So we always prompt our students. We give them the rules. We give them the expectations. We tell them how it's going to work. We give them the out. Hey, if you're getting dizzy, If you're feeling ill, like take it off. It's okay. You're not missing anything. We can pause, we can rewind, we can go back, right? Like we can change things. So we do a lot of prompting and a lot of preemptive work with that.
One thing I will say, if you want to go back to the literature, there's a great article that came from the World Economic Forum that referred to a meta-analysis, a study of studies, and it goes back decades of studying virtual reality in education in various different contexts, and it shows more than 72 experiments showing beneficial outcomes from using VR in the classroom for memory retention and various other areas. So I will drop a link to that in the chat. And I do think also that I love this question, by the way. You should be asking about outcomes and evidence. Absolutely. And then I don't know exactly what the question seems to be getting a little bit is, for some students who are on the autism spectrum, or somebody also asked about hearing loss, there's a bunch of ways that this could be used for students that need additional help in one way or another. And to begin with autism, like we've seen lots of examples. We were working with a school in Peel, Ontario, for instance, that has made 150 different videos for their students where of all kinds of experiences, and they've seen incredible results. So there's really a huge burgeoning area there that's incredibly inspiring. And I think that somebody asked too about people with hearing loss or things like that, that there's a number of ways that spatial technologies can work to enhance what senses we do have. So that, spatial audio is one of those things, and for people who have lower hearing. But again, even for people who are blind, there's lots of ways that this could be used. So it's sort of dependent on individual context, but there are a lot of creative ways that this actually enhances the traditional flat rectangle that we experience with technology.
Yeah, and for myself as well as a classroom teacher and former administrator, and for me, I don't think this is a solution that's going to make learning faster, cheaper, better. But for me, it's giving students authentic learning experiences. So this is a tool now that rather than that they're typically engaging in something that's, very two-dimensional, probably passive. This is a way that students can engage in authentic experiences. And again, like I had said before with the dig and then putting everything together, it seems like for me, for our students and the students I've worked with, it's really stuck with them. So again, allowing them to partake in something that's feels a little bit more authentic to them and that engages them and is exciting, hopefully will actually last with them a little bit longer. And again, like I say, light that spark with our students where now they have this interest because they've experienced this. Not all students can read a book and have the same visualizations as the next person. I know I struggle with that myself, right? So for me, it's adding a whole other layer of thinking and exposing me to something that I'd never would be exposed to. So it's for me, it's a tool, but it's something that seems a little bit more authentic than some of the traditional methods of producing content to your students.
And I think another thing to consider talking about is the ability to have this embodied experience in social practice within like social VR. For example, if you have a fear of public speaking, you can go into a VR situation, very safe situation, and put yourself in front of a bunch of people, so to speak, and learn a new behavior of how to become more comfortable in front of a group of people. So I think that situations like that are another really great way to use VR.
So a question that came in at the beginning of our conversation here, but I think fits here, is talking a little bit about the perception of VR in general. There was a question for future consideration. How do you see the setback of the metaverse at the end of last year affecting this area, right? So there's a popular overall in society perception of what virtual reality means. And I'll date myself here. There was also a platform called Second Life back in the day, which was supposed to transform the education universe and we had our avatars with our wings, and we flew around, and that didn't work out so well. I'll ask each of you your opinion on this. I mean, is that a setback, or are we talking about these are apples and oranges when it comes to applications and true education applications? Brian, I'll put you on the hot seat on that one first.
Okay, great. It's a really good question. So I think if you were to take what does somebody mean by the metaverse, and you would break it down into certain things, so it would be like, I expect there to be 3D web. I expect there to be more AI. I expect there to be, some people put a blockchain into there and things in different areas. Every one of those things is our inevitable future. there's like no, and it's our current state too. Like really, there's no way that those things are going away. Now, there was a lot of hype about the term metaverse and a lot of like, highfalutin language about what it's going to be like that. I think that a lot of that was hype, and I'm glad that it's, sort of, had that bubble popped. I also think that people had some wrong assumptions about how this worked. So for instance, people get really excited about the price dropping of all these headsets. Well, I mean, these are expensive components and things like that. When the price drops, it's probably because they're being subsidized, and it's being subsidized by people tracking your data, and so there are things like that where people are like, whoa, there's a lot of privacy concerns. And so I'm proud to say that Lenovo has been in hundreds of schools every year for the last 5 years selling VR, and has never once tracked any user data. And our business model has nothing to do with advertising or anything like that. And so I do think that there's some of these things that the shakeout of the hype is going to be a good thing.
Any other thoughts on the panel with that?
Well, I just don't think, and Brian, you're absolutely right. Like, and Kevin, you mentioned the Second Life, and I remember being in that world as well. But it's interesting to watch my 9-year-old at home, who I would say lives in a Second Life world on her Roblox account and her Minecraft servers. And she continuously asks me, when are they going to have Minecraft in 360? When can I go and socialize with my friends? And if I would allow her to stay on those servers, she would. Now we securely do that as parents and know who she's talking to with Kids Messenger and so forth. But I think there's a target of people there that would have very good interest in it, and there's application to it. But we just haven't found it yet. But there's more to come. I'm sure we just haven't found the target audience yet for that. But if it was there, I'm sure it would be used.
Yeah, if we added Roblox and Minecraft now, we'd have to add a whole other hour to this conversation. That's a whole aspect of it. And I knew that the most difficult part of my job this afternoon would be to keep us to an hour. But we are getting close to the top here. But I'd like to kind of finish off by kind of asking each of you. I think we've done a great job of kind of establishing the state of play where we are right now. It seems to me, as someone who's just kind of covered this space, there's just been incredible dramatic improvements just over the past 72 months. But I'll ask you each to kind of look into your crystal balls and ask you to see where you see the state of play with VR and AR in 72 months hence. Who do I put on the hot seat for that one first? Maybe I'll go Andy first.
Thanks. I think the big one for us is to continually create content. Lenovo has a great start with some of the creative content, which is really great. Like we talked about, like in the bloodstream, or you're manipulating objects for physics or roller coaster, like that. There's some really good stuff in there. For the elementary level, we continue to seek on opportunities on like community based. So we really want to see more, I'll call them homegrown applications. We've got a great partnership with a local college that they're going to start creating some experiences for us as well. They're more interactive. So we were going to look more on where we make clear, concise, direct connections to existing curriculum to bring that enhancements to curriculum, because it's not going to replace curriculum, but it's going to enhance. So where do we look on areas that we can enhance areas of curriculum? We can't go to a farm all the time. So maybe we need to go to a farm with a camera and a couple people and film farming, right? Like simple things like that, but also getting students to create content using cameras and teachers creating content. So that's what I would like to see in the next 72 months, is more homegrown content.
Jesse, you want to compliment Andy?
Yeah. And for me, from a division level, I need to get more more carts and classroom sets into our schools and have those people to take those up. Again, early stages, but I know in the next 72 months, as the technology goes, I need to have conversations with administrators at our schools that have interest, and I know we have interest, and get those devices in the hands of students and this technology in the hands of students, because they are going to be the drivers of this technology. And they're the ones that are going to come to the teacher and tug on the teacher's coat or hand and say, hey, how come that grade 4 class gets to do tornadoes this week? How come we're learning about tornadoes too? Right. So the students are going to be the driving force of this technology, but we got to get it into our buildings. And, we have to use it safely, appropriately, know when to use it, when not to use it. And that will come yet. But for me, it's getting the devices into our schools, and the technology's there. We just got to get it in the hands of our kids and our teachers, and they'll drive it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jesse. And Becky, any prognostications?
Oh, well, I really have been excited about the social VR piece. Just seeing how, for example, we teach anatomy in VR. We've got actually, during the pandemic, one of our professors was in Brazil and couldn't come back to the country. And we were able to run an entire neuroanatomy lab with the students in headsets on campus. And he was in Brazil and teaching with a 3D model. And it was just really rewarding for everybody to be in that room together, even though they were thousands of miles apart. So I'm really excited about how we can use VR in a social way, because it's not, doesn't have to be you put on a headset and you're all alone in that headset. There's so much more to do, and I think that's where the metaverse also comes in, because the metaverse is it could be on your computer screen, but it can also be in VR as well. So I'm pretty excited about the applications for that in the future.
That's great. So now you're talking a little bit of science fiction there again, from my perspective. That's pretty cool stuff. And Brian, we'll leave you with the last word.
Okay, thanks. I think that when we think about the future, I think there's horizontal and vertical ways we could think. I think we've mostly been talking about the vertical, like new horizons, things that haven't been done yet. So I will say plug for the horizontal. I think many of the things that exist today are going to spread into new fields and be more popular. So a lot of the people who are on the panel today, that there's very few people who have done what they've done. But I think in the coming years, we'll see more and more. So I think there's going to be a growth and spread across schools, and then across new areas where people see that it's applicable. But the new technology is exciting. We talk about 5G technologies. One of the things that's cool about that is that you could take a lot of things that are being done on the headset off of the headset, which makes it cheaper and lighter and less likely to catch on fire. Not that any headset that I know catches on fire, but they do get hot. And so as a result of that, they have to be heavier. And so we'll see more AI, et cetera. Now, in terms of where my vision is, and I mentioned this earlier sort of in a rambly sort of way, but I did put it in the chat, a link to a talk. Brett Victor has this talk, Humane Representation of Thought. And he's not thinking about XR in education, but he's talking entirely about XR in education. He's saying, we need spaces to think in. We need objects to think with. We need to address the entire human being, like the oral, the visual, the kinesthetic, the social, the spatial, all the aspects of what make us human. We need technology that meets us there. And I think that this technology is going to go a long way towards helping to do that. So to me, that's a really inspiring vision.
It's fantastic stuff. So I see that our time is just about up, so I'm going to wrap up the conversation here. Once again, I'd like to thank the panel for a very informative presentation, and I'd like to thank all the audience members for joining us as well. As a reminder, you'll get an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with the slides. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.